Now, there is a canon of scripture. When I say canon, I don't mean the kind that goes boom. No, canon actually was an ancient term used by the Greeks. In a literal sense, it was a rod, or it was a ruler, it was a measurement. So there is a canon of scripture. That is, there is a rule of how books get into the Bible. Just because it's old doesn't mean it goes into the Bible. The canon describes books that are considered sacred, coming from God, and there's a standard of recognizing sacred text. It wasn't just some simple vote of the church in the 4th century like so many of these conspiracy theorists will tell you about, or Dan Brown in his book, The Da Vinci Code, or things like that. That's just pure fiction, okay? There was a particular criteria for books being part of the New Testament and the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament canon, there are 3 steps to canonization. 1, inspiration. 2, recognition by men of God. And 3, collection and preservation by people of God. The history of the canon indicates a gradual development of a collection of prophetic books which were added continually to the law as they were written. Okay? Prophets were confirmed as prophecies came true, and also by doing miracles. So they performed miracles, what they said came true. This was evidence that they were prophets, and so people would listen to what they had written down. Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, sums up this very well. And what Jewish people thought about what we refer to as the Old Testament. Other rabbinical writings also confer this was the widely accepted view. Let's look at what he says. From Artaxerxes, and he's a Persian king, from Artaxerxes until our time, everything has been recorded, but has not been deemed worthy of like credit with what preceded, because the exact succession of prophets ceased. But what faith we have placed in our own writings is evident by our conduct. For though so long a time has now passed, no one has dared to add anything to them, or take anything away from them, or to alter anything in them. That is, only the books written from Moses to Malachi in succession of the Hebrew prophets were considered to be canonical. This is Flavius Josephus. He wrote Antiquities of the Jews. He's a 1st century Jewish historian, Roman historian. And so this is kind of the law of the day. So even back then, there were a lot of books that were written after the book of Malachi, but they were not considered scriptures. Okay, so we already have the 39 books written in Hebrew that are considered scripture. So let's move on. Okay, the New Testament canon, most of the books are recognized early in the church as scripture. Notice this, they were written by the apostles of Jesus Christ. An apostle is somebody who was appointed by Jesus and discipled by him. And so the only apostle we have, of course, after his resurrection that was discipled after the Lord had already went to heaven was the apostle Paul. But we do have the other apostles who walked with Jesus and learned from him, okay? Now, those were part of the New Testament canon. They were written by apostles of Jesus Christ. They were circulated by the early church, and they were recognized as scripture. Notice this, a list of accepted books was available as early as 140 AD in response to Marcion's short list. Marcion was the guy who, he only approved I think 9 or 10 of the books, okay? And so whenever somebody is teaching something in error, that's usually when a bishop or one of the early church fathers will come along and correct him, and they have to put out another list. This is the church. We're always trying to correct errors that people are putting out, false teachings, things of that nature. So it's very reactive. Polycarp in 150 AD was the disciple of the Apostle John. Polycarp, and I don't think that means many fish, but Polycarp quotes at least 12 of 27 books of the New Testament. Okay, Justin Martyr, 140 AD. He considered all of the Gospels scripture, plus most of Paul's epistles, as well as Peter and Revelation. So long before any of the church councils or before Rome and the Catholic Church, we already had a canon or a collection of the New Testament books, okay, that were recognized as scripture. Irenaeus, AD 170, quoted or considered as authentic 23 of 27 books, omitting only Philemon, James, 2 Peter, and 3 John. And here's something you can check out yourself. 95% of the New Testament can be reconstructed from writings as of the early church fathers in the 1st and 2nd century. You can go online to ccl.org. That's a Christian Israel library, and you can look. This is public domain, Antonician Fathers, early church fathers, and you will see most of the New Testament in there. That's why we can't say, oh, you know, that was written. The New Testament was written hundreds of years later after the disciples. Not true. And you can check it out for yourself. Now, the translations of the entire New Testament were available by the end of the 2nd century. That included all 27 books of the New Testament that we have today. Church councils of the 4th century simply confirmed the 27 books of the New Testament that were already accepted by the church. So this idea, this myth of the banned books of the Bible, I'm sorry, all those shows that we're watching on TV, that's sensationalism. It's not scholarship. There are no banned books of the Bible. Just because it's old doesn't mean it gets into the Bible. It's just old. Okay? Many of the so-called Gnostic Gospels appeared long after the time of the Apostles. Most of them a century or two after. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Peter, and so on, were some of 300 pseudographa, or false writings. 50 of them were pseudo-gospel accounts. And so these guys, you know, when you see some special come along and say, well, these other versions of Christianity, you know, these other versions, they didn't quite make it. Nonsense. That's just, these have been debunked a long time ago. The people don't realize today that they've been debunked many years ago. And so when you put something out on TV, it's just like the internet. It must be on TV. It must be true. It must be on the internet. It must be true. No, it's not true. Now, that's the origin. And I know that was kind of a lot, but hopefully you can go back and check it out later. Again, you know, don't take my word for it. Get online, do some research yourself.